Welcome to your favorite channel. What if Tim Malcolm, the calm and controlled man from 90 Day Fiancé, was quietly living a life no one ever expected? And what if Tiffany Franco, known for her emotional honesty, strength, and struggles, was hiding a truth powerful enough to change everything? For more than a year, Tim Malcolm and Tiffany Franco stayed silent. No headlines, no paparazzi photos, no public confirmation. But behind five-star hotel doors, behind private dinners and carefully planned meetings, a relationship was growing far from cameras and judgment. Then came the shock no one was ready for. Tiffany Franco was pregnant, not with one child, but twins. As whispers turned into rumors and pressure closed in, Tim and Tiffany were forced into a spotlight they had tried desperately to avoid. What followed stunned fans around the world. A $650,000 luxury car gift, a public acknowledgement of their relationship, and finally, the announcement that changed everything. Tim Malcolm and Tiffany Franco will marry on February 10th, 2026. Was this a quiet love story built in secrecy, or a risky relationship that waited too long to stay hidden? Tonight on Viva Flick M, we go beyond the rumors and into the choices, consequences, and courage of two people who tried to live privately in a very public world. This is not just gossip. This is not just reality TV. This is the story of Tim Malcolm and Tiffany Franco, told for the first time. Tim and Tiffany were never supposed to be this story. They existed in very different emotional worlds. Tim was known as calm, analytical, and emotionally guarded. Tiffany was known for being open, passionate, and unapologetically emotional. They shared the same reality TV universe, but never shared headlines together. And that made everything easier to hide. It started quietly. No Instagram comments, no suspicious likes, no airport photos, no blurry fan sightings, just conversations, long conversations. What many people don't realize is that relationships formed through reality TV don't end when the cameras stop. The pressure, judgment, and public criticism often create bonds deeper than what viewers ever see. Tim and Tiffany understood that pressure better than most. According to this story's inner timeline, what began as emotional support slowly turned into something more dangerous. Comfort. And comfort, when shared in secrecy, often turns into intimacy. They didn't rush. They didn't announce anything. They didn't perform for anyone. Instead, they chose silence. Five-star hotels became neutral ground, places where privacy was protected and questions weren't asked. No names at the desk, no photos, just time. Time away from fans, critics, and expectations. For nearly a year, this pattern continued. They met. They disappeared. Then they returned to public life as if nothing existed between them. And the world believed it because there were no obvious clues. But silence between two people used to being watched is never accidental. It's deliberate, calculated, protected. Sometimes silence isn't empty. Sometimes it's full of plans, promises, and consequences waiting for the wrong moment to arrive. For Tim and Tiffany, luxury wasn't about comfort. It was about invisibility. These hotels allowed them to exist without being characters in someone else's story. Their meetings followed a careful pattern. Different cities, different dates, no routines. One would arrive hours before the other. Sometimes they didn't even use the same entrance. To the public, Tim stayed busy with projects and appearances within the 90 Day Fiancé world. Tiffany appeared focused on parenting, healing, and personal growth. Online, everything looked normal. Behind closed doors, it wasn't. These meetings weren't reckless. They were controlled and intentional. Long conversations late into the night. Shared meals eaten in silence. Phones face down. Curtains always closed. What made this dangerous wasn't the secrecy. It was the comfort. They talked about things cameras never show. Regret. Exhaustion. The weight of being judged by millions. The loneliness that comes after public exposure. The frustration of being frozen in a version of yourself you've already outgrown. Somewhere in those conversations, the lines blurred. Tim, usually emotionally reserved, opened up in ways he rarely had. Tiffany, often criticized for being too emotional, felt truly heard for the first time. Not judged, not edited, just understood. That's how secrecy becomes addictive. Each meeting made the outside world feel fake, while the private room felt real. But secrets don't stay small. They grow. They demand more. And eventually, they ask for something silence can't give. For months, they believed they were in control. No leaks, no rumors, no staff whispers, just two people convincing themselves that if no one saw it, no one could get hurt. But time changes everything. Bodies change. Emotions deepen. Consequences multiply. What started as private moments slowly became something too large to fit behind locked doors and do not disturb signs. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Life continued quietly. Tim returned to routine. Tiffany stayed focused and composed. The secret still felt manageable. Until it didn't. The first signs were subtle. Exhaustion that sleep didn't fix. Moments of distraction. A feeling that something was changing faster than expected. Tiffany tried to explain it away. Stress. Travel. Pressure. But deep down, she already knew. When the confirmation came, there was no drama. No crying. No shouting. Just silence. The kind that presses on your chest and forces you to breathe differently. She was pregnant. And not just pregnant. She was carrying twins. That truth changed everything instantly. This was no longer a private relationship or a personal decision. This was life multiplying, irreversible and impossible to hide forever. Telling Tim wasn't easy. According to this story's inner narrative, the conversation was quiet. No raised voices, just disbelief followed by a long pause. Tim asked practical questions first. Dates, timelines, certainty. His mind trying to organize chaos. But beneath his calm surface, something shifted. Secrets can survive desire. They cannot survive responsibility. For the first time, they had to face what they'd been avoiding. This wasn't a temporary escape. This wasn't a chapter they could close quietly. Two lives were forming, untouched by fame, secrecy, or public opinion. The weeks that followed were filled with fear. Not of each other, but of exposure. How long could this stay hidden? Who would notice first? Fans, media, family. Every public appearance became a calculation. Every photo was examined. Every comment questioned. Tiffany grew more guarded. Tim became more protective. The gap between private truth and public image grew dangerously thin. And with that pressure came a question neither of them planned to answer so soon. What now? Because hiding a relationship is one thing. Hiding a pregnancy, especially with twins, is something else entirely. The walls they built around their story were starting to crack. And once cracks appear, they spread fast. The secret had grown too large. Soon, it demanded to be acknowledged by them and by the world. Secrets rarely explode without warning. They begin as whispers. Soft, quiet, almost harmless. But once whispers exist, they no longer belong to the people who created the secret. The first signs didn't come from fans. They came from the edges. A hotel staff member mentioning a strange request. A private driver noticing familiar faces booked under different names. Travel schedules that didn't quite line up. On their own, none of this meant much. Together, it formed a pattern. In the gossip world, patterns are everything. Once a pattern is noticed, questions start being asked. Questions that were never meant to be spoken out loud. At first, the rumors were vague. Something's going on. They've been in the same city too often. Too many coincidences. No names yet. Just quiet speculation moving through private chats, anonymous tips, and closed forums where information is traded not for truth, but for leverage. Tim and Tiffany felt the shift before they saw it. Emails increased. Friendly questions became pointed. Interviews suddenly included oddly specific comments. Even compliments felt loaded. You seem really happy lately, people said, watching carefully for a reaction. The pressure was quiet but constant. Then came the leaks. One message from a confidential source landed on a mid-level gossip page. It didn't accuse. It hinted. And hints mixed with curiosity moved fast. Fans began connecting dots. Why were Tim and Tiffany in the same cities so often? Why had Tiffany gone quiet online? Why did both of them seem different? The pregnancy rumors didn't start loudly. They crept in under the disguise of concern. Zoomed in photos, screenshots, debates over shadows and angles. Once the word pregnant entered the conversation, everything sped up. Tim and Tiffany were no longer leading the story. They were reacting to it. Every attempt to stay silent fed the rumors. Every denial felt incomplete. Every smile was analyzed. Behind the scenes, the real fear wasn't embarrassment. It was timing. If the truth came out through leaks instead of honesty, the story would be written for them before they ever had a chance to speak. Sources multiplied. Some real, some fake, some chasing money, others chasing attention. The walls weren't just cracking anymore. They were falling. And Tim and Tiffany had to face the question they had avoided from the start. Do we keep hiding? Or do we step forward before the story runs over us? The internet doesn't wait. It doesn't care about emotions, timing, or preparation. It only cares about impact. When the truth finally surfaced, it didn't arrive gently. It hit like a shockwave. There was no polished interview, no carefully planned announcement. It came through momentum. Too many rumors, too many questions, too many moments that now looked like lies. One post appeared, then another. Then silence broke as screenshots spread faster than explanations ever could. Tim Malcolm and Tiffany Franco were no longer a possibility. They were the conversation. Within hours, fan pages exploded. Comment sections turned into war zones. Supporters argued with critics. Defenders explained. Accusers attacked. Old clips from 90 Day Fiancé were pulled apart and rewatched as if the truth had been hiding in plain sight. The pregnancy revelation followed almost immediately. Not officially confirmed, but implied so strongly that denial became impossible. When the word twin surfaced, it hit harder than anyone expected. Even fans who wanted to be supportive struggled to process it. For Tim and Tiffany, control was gone. Phones rang nonstop. Managers demanded meetings. PR plans were written, deleted, and rewritten within hours. Every option felt wrong. Say nothing and lose the narrative. Speak too soon and risk saying something that couldn't be taken back. Meanwhile, the public did what it always does. It chose sides. Some saw a real love story that simply unfolded in the wrong order. Others saw secrecy, deception, and poor decisions. Many questioned how such a massive truth could be hidden while they continued to live public lives. Tim stayed outwardly calm, measured statements, controlled appearances. But insiders later described this time as the most destabilizing period of his public life. For the first time, logic wasn't enough. Tiffany felt it differently. Every comment felt personal. Every opinion felt invasive. Her body, her choices, her future suddenly felt owned by strangers. Yet something unexpected happened. Instead of pulling apart, they stood closer. The truth had exposed them, but it also forced clarity. No more hiding. No more false names. No more pretending this was temporary. The world knew. And once the truth is out, the only question left is what you do next. Just when fans thought nothing else could shock them, another headline appeared. And this one landed hard. According to circulating reports within this story, Tim Malcolm gifted Tiffany Franco a luxury car valued at $650,000. The kind of number that stops people mid-scroll. The kind of detail that changes how a story feels. At first, many assumed it was exaggerated. Gossip pages inflate numbers all the time. But as more sources repeated the same figure, disbelief turned into debate. Why such a huge gift? Why now? What was it meant to say? Supporters saw commitment. A man stepping up when the world questioned him. A public gesture without words. Proof this wasn't a mistake, but something serious. Critics saw damage control, a distraction, an attempt to replace trust with spectacle. They asked why love needed a price tag. Others saw something deeper. Timing matters. This gift didn't come before the pressure. It came after exposure, after scrutiny, after everything collapsed. That timing made it feel intentional. Insiders suggested the gift wasn't just about luxury. It was about reassurance. To Tiffany, to family, to the public, a message that said, I'm here. I'm not running. The reaction was instant. Fans split again. Praise, backlash, memes. Comparisons to past 90-day fiancé relationships filled timelines. But beyond the noise, the gift had a quieter impact. It changed the stakes. When money enters a relationship publicly, it creates accountability. It removes flexibility. It signals permanence. Tim wasn't just involved anymore. He was invested. And Tiffany, facing pregnancy and relentless judgment, suddenly had something solid in a moment filled with uncertainty. Whether people believed in it or not, the narrative shifted. This was no longer just a scandal. It was starting to look like a future. And in the world of 90-Day Fiancé, that kind of shift always divides the audience. There was no middle ground anymore. The fandom fractured almost overnight. Support turned into loyalty. Skepticism hardened into distrust. Every discussion became a debate about intention, responsibility, and truth. People weren't just reacting to Tim and Tiffany anymore. They were projecting their own beliefs about love, secrecy, and accountability onto them. Some fans defended Tim fiercely. They argued that he stepped up when it mattered most, that the gift, the public acknowledgement, and the visible shift in behavior proved growth. To them, this was a man who had been careful too long and finally chose courage over control. Others weren't convinced. They pointed to the months of silence, the deliberate hiding, the calculated distance. They questioned whether responsibility came from love or from pressure. To them, the timing felt forced, not chosen. Tiffany became the emotional center of the conversation. Sympathy for her grew quickly, especially as the reality of carrying twins became harder to ignore. Many saw her as a woman navigating pregnancy, public judgment, and a relationship that had been hidden far too long. Her vulnerability resonated in ways Tim's calm never could. But not everyone was kind. Critics accused her of manipulation, of using secrecy to build drama, of choosing chaos. The same emotions that once made her relatable were now weaponized against her. And the scrutiny followed her everywhere. Every appearance was dissected, every outfit analyzed, every smile questioned. Was she happy or performing, confident or overwhelmed? The internet demanded answers. She didn't know anyone. Behind closed doors, the pressure reshaped their relationship. Decisions that could have been slow and thoughtful were suddenly urgent. Conversations about the future had to happen now. Where would they live? How public would they be? What boundaries could still exist when so many had already been crossed? For Tim, this was unfamiliar territory. He had always moved carefully, logically, avoiding extremes. Now everything felt extreme. 2 children on the way. A relationship under a microscope. Public expectations he could no longer outthink or outweight. Insiders described him as steady but stretched thin. He tried to manage details, logistics, and optics all at once. But this wasn't a problem that could be solved with planning alone. It required emotional exposure, something he had always struggled with. Tiffany felt the weight differently. Her body was changing. Her emotions were louder. Her sense of privacy was gone. Pregnancy already demands vulnerability. Pregnancy in the public eye multiplies it. She leaned inward, choosing smaller circles, fewer appearances. When she did speak, her words were measured. Not defensive, not dramatic, just careful. It was clear she was protecting something now, not hiding it. As weeks passed, something shifted again. The chaos slowly settled into something quieter. Not peace, but acceptance. The story had broken. The world had reacted. And now, there was nothing left to hide from. That's when the announcement came. Not through a dramatic reveal. Not through a flashy exclusive. Just a simple confirmation that carried enormous weight. Tim Malcolm and Tiffany Franco would marry on February 10th, 2026. The reaction was immediate. Shock, disbelief, relief, criticism, celebration. All at once. For some, it felt sudden. For others, overdue. For many, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle they had been watching form in real time. The announcement reframed everything. The secrecy, the pregnancy, the gift. It all pointed forward now instead of backward. But marriage didn't silence the doubts. People questioned whether the decision was rushed, whether it was driven by love or obligation. whether marriage could stabilize something that began in secrecy. Others argued that there is no perfect timeline, that life doesn't wait for clean narratives, that sometimes people build futures out of messes. Tim and Tiffany didn't respond to the noise directly. They didn't argue their case. They didn't defend their choices publicly. They moved forward. Behind the scenes, preparations began quietly. Not extravagant, not performative. Just practical steps toward a shared life. Doctor's appointments, legal paperwork, family conversations that were difficult but necessary. The wedding itself wasn't framed as a fairy tale. It was framed as a decision, a commitment made with full awareness of consequences, not illusions. That distinction matters, because this story was never about romance alone. It was about